Percy had just wrapped up another bad date with yet another odd match from a dating app. After trying his luck with apps following a string of failed real-life relationships, he finally decided to quit them for good and focus on himself and his career, trusting the right person would come along. As he stepped out of the restaurant, he accidentally bumped into a tall, masculine figure. Looking up, he locked eyes with the most stunning man he'd ever seen. The man quickly apologized and hurried off, but Percy was left mesmerized. He glanced back to see the man had vanished as if he weren't real. Later that night, back at home, Percy made the decision to delete his dating apps. Just before doing so, he came across a profile of the man he had just encountered. His name was Shawn, 36 years old. Percy wondered why someone like him would be on a dating app, but sent a message anyway. To his surprise, Shawn responded within seconds. Wanting to avoid wasting time with endless chatting, Percy suggested meeting up right away, and Shawn agreed. The next day, Percy arranged to meet at the same restaurant where they had first crossed paths. As he waited, a balding, middle-aged man approached and sat down. Percy politely said, "I'm sorry, but that seat's taken." The man responded, "I know. I'm the one you're waiting for." Shocked, Percy asked, "Shawn?" The man nodded, and Percy muttered to himself, "Did I really just get catfished again?" He asked the man how he got the photo of the person he used. The man admitted, "I used my boss's picture and name, but that's not important. What matters is personality." Percy then asked why he didn't use his real photo. The man replied, "Would you have messaged me back if you knew what I looked like?" Percy hesitated before saying, "No, but someone else might." The man sighed, "I'm almost 40 and have never been in a relationship. I'm just desperate." Percy shook his head. "And you thought catfishing was the solution?" The man shrugged. "Well, I got to have a date with you, didn't I?" Percy scoffed. "This is not a date." "So, did you say the real Shawn is your boss?" The man nodded. "Why do you like him? Why does everyone like him?" "If only I had his face." Percy asked what Shawn was like, and the man simply said, "He's good. He has it all." Percy smiled slightly and asked, "Can I get his contact?" The man claimed he didn't have it. Percy then said, "If you don't give it to me, I'll find him myself and tell him what you've been doing with his identity." Panicked, the man said, "It's bad enough that I'll probably die single. I can't lose my job too. I really don't have his personal contact, but I can tell you where the company is so you ask him for it yourself." Percy nodded in agreement. The man scribbled down the address, adding, "By the way, he's recently divorced and has a kid." Percy simply replied that he didn't mind that and left. A week later, Percy went to the company to apply for a job, but the HR department informed him there were no openings. As he turned to leave, he accidentally bumped into the real Shawn, who had a little boy by his side, presumably his son. "Are you lost?" Shawn asked. Percy shook his head. "No, I'm here for a job." "Did you talk to HR?" Shawn inquired. "I did," Percy replied, "but they said there were no vacancies." Shawn nodded. "Okay, then maybe you should look elsewhere." Percy immediately asked, "What about you? Do you need any help? A chauffeur, a cook, a gardener?" His eyes shifted to the child, then he added, "Or maybe a nanny." Shawn paused for a moment, considering. "Actually, I do need a new nanny for Simon. The old one got married and left, but I don't know you. How can I trust you with my son?" Percy quickly handed over his CV. "This should tell you everything you need to know about me." Shawn glanced over it and raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure you want to settle for being a nanny with such an impressive CV?" Percy nodded without hesitation. Shawn looked at Simon, who seemed restless, clearly bored of hanging around the office. Shawn turned to Percy and asked him to come for an interview at his house the next day, since it was a weekend. Percy tried to contain his excitement, barely managing to hold back a squeal. The next day, Percy arrived at the address Shawn had given him. During the interview, Shawn asked, "Tell me everything I need to know about you if I'm going to trust you with Simon." Percy shared his background in detail, even oversharing. Shawn nodded. "I did a background check, and everything matches what you've told me." He paused before asking, "Why do you want this job though? You already have a good one." Percy explained, "I work from home, and my job doesn't take much time, so I get bored. I just want something to keep me occupied." Before Shawn could respond, Percy felt a splash of water on his face. He turned to see Simon aiming a water gun at him. "Sorry about that," Shawn apologized. "He just dislikes everyone." Percy simply grinned and stood up, grabbing another water gun. He chased after Simon, who giggled and ran. Soon, the two were in the middle of a full-on water gun battle. Watching them play, Shawn muttered, "I guess not everyone." As Percy and Simon continued their playful fight, Shawn decided it was a good sign that Simon seemed to like him. He walked over to tell Percy he was hired and he could start work on Monday. Just then, Shawn was hit with a splash of water. Percy had accidentally aimed at him instead of Simon. Percy and Simon froze, staring at each other before looking at Shawn, both smiling sheepishly. On Monday, Shawn went over Percy's new duties. Percy's job started after Simon finished school. Shawn took Simon to school in the morning, and Percy picked him up in the afternoon. Percy would help Simon change, eat, finish his homework, and ensure he went to bed on time before heading home. Once Shawn returned from work, this schedule meant that Percy only saw Shawn at night, and their conversations were mostly limited to Simon's daily routine and well-being. Percy had weekends off too, since Shawn spent that time with Simon for father-son bonding. Percy noticed that Simon yawned a lot whenever he picked him up from school. Curious, Percy asked why he was always so tired, and Simon explained that he had to wake up extra early every morning. Since Shawn left for work early, Simon had to wake up at the same time, so his dad could drop him off at school before heading to work. This meant Simon arrived at school well before everyone else. An idea popped into Percy's head that could help both Simon and himself. The next day, when Shawn came home from work, Percy brought it up. "Simon always seems tired when I pick him up. He told me he wakes up too early because you have to drop him off before work, and I think it's affecting him. It might be impacting his focus and energy." Shawn looked surprised. "I hadn't realized. He never complains about anything." Percy then suggested, "What if I moved in? I could take Simon to school in the mornings, so he can sleep in a little longer. It might help." Shawn thought about it for a moment and realized Percy had a point. "That does sound like a good idea. I didn't know I was stressing him out like that." After agreeing to Percy moving in, Shawn was taken aback when Percy immediately went out and returned with his luggage. "Where's my room?" Percy asked with a grin. Shawn blinked in surprise. "Oh, I wasn't expecting you to move in this quickly." Percy mumbled to himself, smirking slightly, "Me neither." Shawn led Percy to his new room, but as they reached his own bedroom, Percy walked right in. This is my room," Shawn pointed out. Feigning innocence, Percy replied, "Oh, I thought we'd be sharing." Shawn smiled. "No, there are plenty of spare rooms in this house." He guided Percy to a different room where he'd be staying. After showing Percy his new space, Shawn went over Simon's school schedule and morning routine. He then handed Percy a car key. "What's this for?" Percy asked, confused. "For taking Simon to school and picking him up," Shawn explained. "His school is really strict about lateness, so I don't want him to ever be late." Percy nodded. "Okay," Shawn added, "you can use the car for your personal stuff too, after Simon's taken care of. That's all for now. Good night." As Shawn turned to leave, Percy blurted out, "That's it." Shawn stopped, turning back. "Is there something else?" Percy paused, staring at Shawn for a moment before asking, "Are you interested in anyone right now?" Shawn looked confused. "Huh?" Percy quickly brushed it off. "Never mind. Good night, Shawn replied, still puzzled, before heading to his room. The next morning, Percy woke up earlier than usual to catch Shawn before he left for work. He managed to meet him just as Shawn was about to head out. "Good morning," Shawn greeted. "Good morning," Percy replied, running a hand through his messy hair. He noticed Shawn's tie was crooked and stepped closer, adjusting it while staring intently at Shawn's face. Shawn didn't know how to react or where to look as Percy was close to him. When Percy finished fixing the tie, he stepped back with a light smile and asked, "I'm about to make coffee. Do you want some?" Shawn shook his head. "I don't drink coffee," noted. "What do you usually have for breakfast then?" Percy asked. "I usually skip breakfast," Shawn admitted. Percy frowned slightly. "That's not healthy. You should at least have something, even if it's just a slice of bread." Without waiting for a reply, Percy quickly excused himself. "Wait right here," he said, darting off to the kitchen. Moments later, he returned with a peanut butter sandwich. As he held it up to Shawn's mouth, he paused. "You're not allergic to peanut butter, are you?" Shawn shook his head, and Percy sighed in relief. "Good, you can eat this on your way to work." He gently fed Shawn a bite of the sandwich, before Shawn took the rest from his hand with a mumbled "thank you" and rushed out. "Have a great day," Percy called after him, a satisfied smile on his face. A little while later, Simon woke up and panicked when he saw the time. It was later than usual, and his dad hadn't woken him up. He bolted out of his room, only to run into Percy. "Relax, buddy, no need to rush," Percy said. "I'm taking you to school from now on, so you don't need to wake up earlier than you should." Simon's eyes lit up. "Really?" Percy nodded. "Yep, I'll be living with you guys now." Simon smiled excitedly. Percy then nudged him gently toward the bathroom. "Now go get showered and dressed, and come down for breakfast. I'll take you to school." That night, Percy skipped dinner, waiting for Shawn to come home so they could eat together. When Shawn finally returned, he found Percy dozing off at the dining table, his dinner untouched. He walked over and gently tapped Percy awake. Startled, Percy blinked and saw Shawn standing over him. "Oh, you're back," he said, rubbing his eyes. Shawn glanced at the food in front of Percy. "Do you not like the food?" Percy quickly shook his head. "I do. I was just waiting for you so we could have dinner together." "Or, do you usually skip dinner too?" Surprised, Shawn asked. "Why would you wait for me? Is it wrong to want to wait and have dinner with you?" Percy replied. Shawn softened. "That's not what I meant," he sighed. Without another word, he picked up Percy's plate and walked over to the microwave. "What are you doing?" Percy asked, confused. "Warming up the food," Shawn replied. "It's cold now." Percy relaxed, a small smile tugging at his lips. Okay." After warming both their meals, Shawn sat down with Percy at the table. They ate in comfortable silence for a moment before Percy asked, "How was work today?" Shawn, caught off guard by the question, blinked in surprise. It had been a long time since anyone had asked him that. "Work was good," he finally replied. Then, after a brief pause, he added, "How was Simon today?" "Better," Percy answered with a smile. Shawn nodded gratefully. "Thank you for taking good care of him." Percy smiled, then asked, "Aren't you going to ask how my day was?" Shawn looked up. "Oh, right. Sorry, how was your day?" Percy replied, "It's good now that I get to see you." Caught off guard again, Shawn looked around awkwardly. He stood up abruptly, picking up his empty plate, saying he was done eating. He bid goodnight to Percy, then headed to Simon's room, where he quietly checked on his son. As always, he leaned down to kiss Simon gently on the forehead, before heading to his own room. Percy quickly became part of the family. Both Shawn and Simon grew accustomed to having him around, and soon they were spending weekends and holidays together like a true family. One day, after picking up Simon from school, they were walking to the car when they spotted a woman, Kate, leaning casually against their vehicle as if it were hers. Before Percy could say anything, she rushed towards Simon, seemingly ready to hug him. Percy instinctively pulled Simon aside and asked her who she was. "I'm Simon's mother," she replied with a sharp tone, then looked Percy up and down. "And who are you? And why do you have Shawn's car?" "I'm Simon's nanny," Percy responded. Kate gave a sarcastic laugh. "Since when did Shawn start hiring young men as nannies? And giving them his car too?" Without giving Percy time to reply, she added, "Anyway, I'm here for my son. You can leave now." Percy, unfazed, replied, "I'm sorry, but I don't know for sure who you are, so I can't just leave him with you." Kate rolled her eyes. "Ask Simon who I am." Percy turned to Simon, who confirmed that she was indeed his mother. But there was no joy or excitement in his face, no trace of the happiness you'd expect from a child seeing his mother after a long time. "Even so," Percy said firmly, "I can't let him go with you. He doesn't seem particularly excited to see you." "Who are you to decide whether I can take my own child or not?" Kate snapped. Percy knelt down to Simon's level and asked, "Do you want to go with your mom?" Simon shook his head silently. Percy stood back up and turned to Kate. "He doesn't want to leave with you, so I think you should go now." Without waiting for her response, Percy ushered Simon into the car and drove off, making jokes along the way to lighten the mood. He didn't ask Simon any questions about what had happened. Later that evening, when Shawn returned home, Percy filled him in on the encounter with Kate. Shawn sighed heavily, his face tight with frustration. "If that happens again, call me immediately," he said, before heading straight to his room without another word. Percy didn't press him for any more details. The next morning, Percy woke up early as usual, hoping to catch Shawn before he left for work. However, Shawn hadn't come downstairs yet, and his car was still parked outside. Worried that Shawn might have overslept, Percy decided to check on him. He knocked on Shawn's door several times but received no response. Hesitating for a moment, he finally decided to open the door. Just as he stepped inside, Shawn emerged from the bathroom, dripping wet with just a towel loosely wrapped around his waist. Percy froze, his eyes widening in shock, as he struggled to look away from Shawn's muscular, glistening body. Shawn asked, "Do you need something?" Percy, still staring in a daze, finally managed to respond, "I thought you were still asleep, so I came to wake you up. I didn't want you to be late for work." Shawn responded, "Oh, I'm not going in today. I always work from home when Simon's on vacation. He'll be on break starting tomorrow." "Oh, so you'll be home for the next few weeks?" Percy asked, trying to compose himself. Shawn nodded. "Yeah, I'll take Simon to school today, so if you want to sleep in you can." Percy quickly replied, "No, we can take him together." Shawn smiled slightly and nodded. "Okay then." As Percy turned to leave, he found it difficult to tear his eyes away from Shawn's body. While dropping Simon off at school, Percy couldn't help but notice the flirty attention Shawn received from both parents and teachers. The teachers, who barely acknowledged Percy when he dropped Simon off, were now all smiles and warm greetings. One parent even approached Shawn, casually asking if he had found someone new after the divorce, and not so subtly mentioning that she too was single. Percy glared at them, hoping to shoo them away, but it was as if he didn't even exist. As they returned to the car, Percy couldn't hold back his sarcasm. "Wow, I didn't know you were famous around here." Shawn, seemingly oblivious to the attention, shrugged. "I don't even know them." Percy wanted to sulk out of jealousy, but quickly reminded himself that they weren't a couple. Shawn didn't even know he liked him that way. He just stayed silent for the rest of the ride home. When they arrived back at the house, Shawn started walking toward his room, but Percy impulsively blocked his path and blurted out, "I like you." Shawn smiled politely. "Oh, thank you." Percy shook his head. "No, I mean, I like you, in that way, you know?" Shawn stopped in his tracks, taken aback. "Oh, I don't." Before Shawn could finish, Percy cut him off. "I'm not saying this to get an answer from you. I just wanted you to know. I'll wait until you like me back." Shawn sighed, his expression softening as he spoke. "Percy, you're young, full of life. You should be chasing your dreams and enjoying your youth, not wasting your time on someone like me, a boring man with a kid." Percy immediately replied, "You are my dream. And sir, last time I checked, 36 isn't old. Also, there's nothing wrong with having a kid. I love Simon." Shawn asked, "What if I never feel the same way about you?" Percy replied, "What if you do?" Shawn then asked, "All right, then tell me, what do you like about me?" Percy hesitated, struggling to find the words. Shawn shook his head. "See, it's just an infatuation, a fleeting attraction, a feeling that will pass." Shawn walked past Percy and disappeared into his room. Percy stood there, still quiet. When it was time to pick up Simon from school, Percy volunteered to go alone, but Shawn insisted on going himself. In the end, they both ended up heading to the school together. Percy swatted the air as parents and teachers fawned over Shawn again and mumbled under his breath, "So many FLIs around." On the drive home, Percy suggested they stop to shop for groceries, pointing out that they were running low on supplies at the house. "We're running low on supplies at the house." Shawn replied that the cook would take care of it, but Percy insisted, saying it would be fun to do together. Eventually, Shawn agreed and drove them to the mall. At the store, Simon sat in the shopping cart as Percy and Shawn walked side by side, picking out items for the house. Simon kept sneaking snacks into the cart, but Shawn took them out one by one, reminding Simon that they weren't healthy. Simon only managed to keep a box of fresh juice and sulked for the rest of the shopping trip, staring longingly at the shelves of treats. Once they got back home, Simon went straight to his room. A little while later, Percy quietly followed him and handed him one of the shopping bags. Simon's eyes widened as he opened it, finding all the snacks his dad had put back earlier. "How did you get them?" His excitement barely contained. Percy grinned. "Shh, keep it down, or your dad will hear. We'll hide these under your bed for now, and we can eat them together tonight, after Shawn goes to sleep." Simon giggled in excitement, hiding the snacks, eagerly awaiting their nighttime. Percy returned to the kitchen where he and Shawn unpacked and organized the groceries together. At night, Percy quietly sneaked into Simon's room, thinking he was already asleep since he was tucked in with his eyes closed. Just as Percy was about to leave, Simon shot up excitedly. "I was waiting for you." Grinning, Percy joined him, and they brought out the hidden snacks, munching happily while watching Simon's favorite cartoon on a low volume. Suddenly, it began raining heavily, and they both knew it was only a matter of time before Shawn would check on Simon, as he usually couldn't sleep alone during storms. Sure enough, they soon heard footsteps approaching. Percy quickly scrambled to hide the snacks, shoving them wherever he could and turning off the tablet. But Simon, still chewing on a mouthful of chips, couldn't finish in time. Percy quickly pulled Simon into his chest, trying to shield his face from Shawn's view just as the door opened. Shawn, confused to see Percy in the room, asked, "Why are you in here?" Thinking fast, Percy replied, I heard him scream while I was going to get some water." "Scream?" Shawn asked. "Why didn't I hear it? Is he okay?" He tried to turn Simon's face toward him, but Simon just nodded quickly, still hiding his stuffed cheeks. Percy covered for him. Maybe he's still in shock," Shawn sighed, concerned, and sat down on the bed. "Maybe I should wait until I'm sure he's really okay." Percy nodded awkwardly, and silence fell over the room. They both sat there, glancing at each other, and then awkwardly up at the ceiling. After a while, they heard light snoring. Simon had fallen asleep with the chips still half chewed in his mouth. His small body slumped out of Percy's arms, and as he lay back on the bed, the partially chewed chips were clearly visible in his open mouth. Shawn, his expression puzzled, reached over with a tissue and gently removed the chips. Then he looked at Percy, raising an eyebrow. "What is this?" Percy stammered nervously, knowing they were caught. I don't know." Percy's orange-stained fingers and grabbed his wrist. "Were you two eating?" "What? No," Percy blurted out, but the denial was weak. Shawn searched the room and found the hidden stash of chips and chocolates from the mall. Turning to Percy, absolutely dumbfounded, Shawn started to say something, but before he could get the words out, Percy jumped up and dashed toward the door. "Good night." In the days that followed, Percy and Shawn grew closer, spending more time together now that they were around each other all day. One day, Shawn had bought tickets for a cartoon movie to take both Simon and Percy. However, just as they were about to leave for the outing, Shawn received an urgent call from work that required his immediate presence at the office. He didn't want to miss the outing with Simon, but the situation left him with no choice. Percy suggested they postpone the trip for another day, but Simon had been eagerly waiting to see the movie and couldn't wait anymore. Shawn, not wanting to let Simon down, asked Percy to take Simon to the movie, saying he would try to finish his work quickly and meet them there later. As Shawn prepared to leave, Percy stepped in front of him and held out his hand. Simon, watching, also stretched out his hand as well. Shawn looked at them both, confused at first, before pulling out his wallet and handing them some cash. They kept their hands out, and Shawn, still not sure what they wanted, kept giving them more cash until his wallet was empty. He finally handed over his card and asked, "This should be enough, right?" Percy chuckled and shook his head. "I was just asking for the movie tickets." Realization hit Shawn. "Oh, right," he said, laughing at himself as he handed them the tickets. He then told them to keep the money in the card, advising them to buy whatever they wanted, but to avoid too many unhealthy snacks. Percy and Simon arrived at the cinema, ready for their outing. Just as they were getting out of the car, they ran into Kate. She didn't seem surprised to see them, as she had been following them. Percy glanced at Simon to gauge his reaction before trying to walk past her, ignoring her entirely. But Kate blocked their path. "I thought you were just an ordinary nanny," she said with a sharp tone. "But after following you for some time, I see you're more than that. What, already started going on dates now?" Percy, already irritated, remembered Shawn's words to call him if Kate ever approached them. He pulled out his phone to call Shawn, but Kate quickly grabbed the phone and hung up. Frustrated, Percy asked Simon to wait in the car. Turning back to Kate, Percy asked, "What's your problem?" "My problem," Kate sneered, "is you being around my family." Percy, unsure of what had caused the divorce between her and Shawn, wanted to be careful with his words. "Why do you have a problem with me?" he asked. Kate crossed her arms and said, "I know what you are. You might have succeeded in seducing naive Shawn, but I don't want you around my son. I don't need you influencing him or turning him into what you are." Percy's face tightened. "And by what I am, you mean gay?" Kate didn't flinch. "I wonder what you might have been doing to my son when no one's around." Poor Simon. Kate continued, "His father and I may not be together anymore, but as long as Simon lives with Shawn, I'll have a say in who Shawn gets into a relationship with. I don't want any bad influence, or anyone who will mistreat my son. This is your first and last warning. Quit the nanny job and stay far away from my family. I won't be warning you with just my mouth next time." Before Percy could say anything back, Kate dropped his phone onto the ground and walked away. Percy picked up his phone, noticing the screen had cracked. He took a deep breath, trying to calm himself down before getting Simon out of the car. Determined not to let the encounter with Kate ruin their day, Percy put on a smile, made a few jokes, and diverted Simon's attention. They bought some snacks and made it just in time for the start of the cartoon. As the movie played, Simon was completely engrossed, while Percy found himself lost in thought. So absorbed in his own world, Percy didn't even notice Shawn had arrived and sat beside them until the lights came up at the end of the film. Surprised, Percy turned to Shawn and asked, "When did you get here?" "A while ago," Shawn replied with a small smile. Percy nodded. "Oh," he said quietly. Shawn suggested they go somewhere else, since he'd missed most of the movie. But Simon, already yawning, looked ready to head home, and Percy seemed like he just wanted to call it a night too. "Maybe not," Shawn said after. "We can go out again together some other time." They left the cinema, with Shawn driving them all home in one car. Simon fell asleep almost immediately in the back seat, and Percy remained quiet. Noticing Percy's mood, Shawn asked, "Are you okay? Is something bothering you?" Percy quickly replied that he was fine, but his tone wasn't convincing. Shawn then remembered Percy's earlier call that had abruptly ended and asked, "Why did you call earlier?" Percy hesitated, unsure whether to bring up what had happened with Kate. After a moment of consideration, he simply replied, "It was just a mistake call." Shawn nodded, though he didn't seem entirely convinced. After a few minutes, he decided to go check on him. He knocked on Percy's door, and Percy invited him in. "Do you need something?" Percy asked as Shawn entered. Shawn, looking at him with concern, asked, "Can you tell me what's bothering you?" Percy sighed. "Is it that obvious?" Shawn nodded, waiting patiently. Finally, Percy gave in and said, "We bumped into your ex-wife today." Shawn's expression hardened, a flash of anger crossing his face. "Is that why you called earlier? What did she say to you?" Percy, feeling a bit apprehensive, replied, "She told me to stay away from you and Simon." Shawn let out a frustrated sigh, pulling out his phone. Percy guessed he was about to call Kate, and quickly intervened. "You don't have to doing that." Shawn sighed again, calming himself. "Did she do anything else?" His eyes landed on Percy's cracked phone. "Did she break your phone?" Percy shrugged. "It doesn't matter. It's just a phone." After a brief silence, Percy bit his lip and hesitated before asking, "Can I ask what happened between you two?" Shawn explained, "Kate only married me with the intention of divorcing me later to take some of my property. She didn't have a good reason for divorcing me, and I had a good lawyer, so she left with nothing." Percy then asked, "Why doesn't Simon seem to like her? Even if she wasn't a good wife or person, she seemed to care a lot about him." Shawn continued, "She only had Simon as part of her plan. When she couldn't get anything from the divorce, she turned to trying to gain custody of Simon for child support benefits. She never cared for him before. She spent most of her time going out with her brothers and friends. When we argued about it, she'd take her frustration out on Simon, scolding and punishing him for every little thing. Percy looked at Shawn, his eyes filled with sympathy. "Can I hug you?" Shawn nodded, and Percy gently embraced him, patting his back. "It must have been hard for you." "And for Simon," Percy said softly, holding onto him for a moment longer. Shawn sighed and apologized. "I'm sorry for what happened with Kate today. I'll make sure your phone is fixed tomorrow." Percy just nodded quietly, still holding on to Shawn. They stayed like that for a minute, before Shawn pulled back. "You should get some rest. Good night." As Shawn turned to leave, Percy hesitated, then asked, "I don't know if I should ask this, but do you still love her?" Shawn didn't hesitate in replying he didn't. Percy nodded, feeling relieved. "Good night." The next morning, Shawn woke everyone up, saying they were going on a road trip. Simon's face lit up with excitement at the word trip. Percy, on the other hand, asked, "When did you plan a road trip?" "Just now," Shawn replied with a grin. Percy chuckled. "Who plans a road trip the morning of?" Shawn shrugged. "Isn't that normal?" "Okay," Percy said, playing along. "So where exactly are we going?" Shawn scratched his neck. "We'll figure it out on the way." Just as they were about to start getting ready, the sky opened up and it began raining heavily. Undeterred, Shawn assured them, "It's just a short rain. Let's get ready." So they packed light and sat by the door, ready to head out. But hours passed, and the rain showed no signs of stopping. Simon and Percy exchanged glances, then looked at Shawn, who, despite his disappointment, was trying to remain optimistic. With a smile, he said, "Okay, how about we have the trip here at home?" Simon and Percy, confused, asked in unison, "How?" Shawn dramatically pulled out the contents of his bag, revealing a surprising assortment. A karaoke microphone, a bunch of snacks, most of which were the ones he'd confiscated from Simon and Percy over time, a tent, sleeping bags, and more. Percy, flabbergasted, asked, "Where did you find all this?" Shawn shrugged. "The garage." "And the snacks?" "They were in my safe." Percy blinked, unsure whether to laugh or be amazed. Shawn, without missing a beat, turned on the karaoke mic and put on music. "Imagine we're in the car, already on the road," he said, swaying to the beat. He began singing and dancing, completely losing himself in the moment. Percy turned to Simon and whispered, "What's gotten into your dad today?" Simon shrugged, equally surprised by Shawn's spontaneous behavior. Before long, Shawn had them both up and dancing with him, singing along. They set up the tent in the living room, bundled together in sleeping bags, eating snacks, and playing word games. Simon eventually got tired and drifted off to sleep. Now alone awake in the tent, with only the sound of the rain outside, Shawn and Percy found themselves close together. Shawn broke the comfortable silence, saying, "I'm glad I was able to cheer you up." Percy glanced at him. "Did you do all this just to lighten my mood?" Realizing he had unintentionally given himself away, Shawn quickly looked anywhere but at Percy, fumbling with his words. "No, I just did it because I missed our movie date." "Date?" Percy teased, raising an eyebrow. Shawn sighed. "I should take Simon to his room. It's cold here," he said, quickly getting up to carry Simon to bed. Percy chuckled softly as he watched Shawn's flustered exit. Simon resumed school, which meant Shawn had to start going to work. Every day, he found himself wanting to finish everything quickly to get home earlier, unlike his old workaholic self, giving himself more work after work. He always found himself wanting to spend time with Percy, happy whenever Percy was happy and unhappy whenever he wasn't. He always had Percy in his mind, and couldn't look away from him whenever they were together. One day, Percy informed Shawn that he wanted to go home. Shawn was panicked, thinking Percy wanted to quit. He quickly asked, "Did I do something wrong?" Percy chuckled, "Relax, no. I just need to grab a USB drive that has some important files for work, but I wanted to let you know because I won't be able to pick Simon up today. I'll be back later tonight." Shawn sighed in relief. "Oh, okay," Percy teased. "Are you scared I might leave and not come back?" Without hesitation, Shawn replied, "Yes." Percy was taken aback, not expecting that answer from him. He got flustered and hurriedly left. On his way back after grabbing the flash drive, he was blocked by another car in a secluded area. The car stayed and kept blocking his path, until he got down to check what was going on. As he did, the occupants of the other car also emerged. It was Kate and two men. Percy's heart sank, his emotions swirling in a mix of anger. You, again? Percy asked incredulously. Kate smirked. I warned you. I told you next time. I wouldn't be giving any warnings with words. With a signal from Kate, the two men charged at Percy. They beat him viciously, throwing punches and kicks. Percy tried to protect his face, but it was impossible to avoid all the blows. Luckily, some passers-by saw the attack and screamed, threatening to call the police. Frightened, Kate and the men fled. Bruised and in pain, Percy dragged himself back to his car. His face was badly bruised, and despite his efforts to protect it, he could see the damage in the mirror. He knew he couldn't go back to Shawn's house looking like this. He decided to head to his own home instead. He called Shawn, saying something had come up and that he wouldn't be able to make it back tonight. Back at Shawn's house, the worry began to set in as it got late, and Percy still hadn't returned. When Shawn received Percy's call saying he wouldn't make it home, something in Percy's voice didn't sit right with him. Are you okay? Shawn asked, his concern growing. I'm fine, Percy replied. Shawn didn't buy it and wanted to head to Percy's house, but he couldn't leave Simon alone at home. Tossing in bed, restlessly worried, Shawn decided to go. Shawn carried the sleeping Simon to his car and drove straight to Percy's house. When he arrived, he knocked on the door. Percy, seeing him through the peephole, panicked. He rushed to find a mask to cover his bruised lips and cheeks, pulling his hair forward to hide the injuries around his eyes. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than nothing. He opened the door cautiously, but as soon as Shawn saw the bruise on his face, his expression darkened. Without a word, Shawn stepped forward and gently pulled off the mask, revealing the extent of Percy's injuries. His anger grew as he noticed Percy wincing and twitching from pain. Lifting Percy's shirt, Shawn saw the deep bruises on his stomach. Fury flashed in his eyes as he asked, "Who did this to you?" Percy remained silent, but Shawn wasn't going to let it go. His voice grew more intense. "Who did this to you?" In that moment, Shawn looked so terrifying that Percy couldn't bring himself to lie. Quietly, he told Shawn what happened. Shawn's jaw clenched, his face hardening with rage. Without another word, he went to the car, carefully placing Simon in Percy's room, before heading toward the door. Percy grabbed Shawn's arm. "What are you going to do?" Shawn, seething with anger, replied, "I let it go the first time. I'm not letting it go this time. Don't stop me." Percy slowly let go of his arm. "I'm not stopping you." Shawn left Percy's house with a storm of rage brewing inside him, heading straight to where he knew Kate and her brothers would be. He barged into the house without knocking, his mind set on confronting them. The moment Kate saw him, she put on a fake cry, running up to him, trying to hug him. "I'm sorry, Shawn. Let's get back together," she pleaded, her brothers standing behind her in support. Shawn pushed her away, his voice cold. "I'll deal with you later. First, I need to finish with them." He went straight for Kate's brothers, landing a powerful punch on one of them. The other tried to attack Shawn, but he was ready, striking him hard and sending both brothers to the floor. Every time they got back up, Shawn hit them again, delivering blows and kicks to every part of their bodies. They ended up more bruised than Percy, unable to rise from the floor again. When he was satisfied, Shawn turned back to Kate, who was trembling in fear. "Stay away from my family," Shawn growled, his voice low and dangerous. "I'm holding myself back right now, but if I see you near us again, I won't mind putting my hands on you too." Kate, still shaking, stammered, "But Simon is my child. And how is that chicken nugget nanny your family?" Shawn's glare hardened. "I won't warn you again. Try anything, and you'll spend the rest of your life in jail. Of course, after I do to you what I did to them." Without waiting for a reply, Shawn stormed out, slamming the door behind him. He drove back to Percy's house after. When he arrived, Percy sighed in relief, grateful to see Shawn unharmed. But he quickly noticed the bruises on Shawn's knuckles, which looked like they had been through a rough fight. Percy gently took Shawn's hand in his, examining the damage. "Did you beat them up?" he asked, his voice soft. Shawn raised an eyebrow. "Are you worried about them?" Percy shook his head with a small smile. Shawn's face softened, and he replied, "First thing tomorrow, I'm enrolling you and Simon into a martial arts class. right after I take you to the hospital. No bargaining. Percy chuckled. You do this, and you still expect me not to fall for you? Shawn didn't reply, instead leading Percy to sit down. Where's your first aid kit? I don't have one, just some ointment somewhere, Percy admitted. Shawn found the ointment and came back, gently applying it to Percy's bruises. He started with Percy's stomach, lifting his shirt as he carefully spread the ointment. While Shawn worked, Percy asked, Why did you come here? I told you I was fine and that something just came up. Shawn, still focused on applying the ointment, replied, I could tell you were lying. Your voice gave it away. Percy was surprised. You could tell from just my voice? You just made my heart flutter. And how did you know where my house is? Shawn smiled faintly. I got it from the background check I did on you. Percy chuckled. Oh right, I forgot about that. As Shawn moved to apply the ointment to the side of Percy's lips, Percy joked, You know, when you were angrily asking me who hurt me, you looked extra hot. I forgot I was in pain. Shawn pressed the cotton swab a bit harder in response, causing Percy to wince. Do you remember now that you're in pain? Shawn teased. It hurts, Percy replied. Shawn softly apologized, sorry, gently lifted Percy's chin and blew softly on the bruise. Percy, feeling the tension rise, said, If you keep doing that, I won't be able to hold myself back from kissing you. Shawn paused, his eyes flickering to Percy's lips. Slowly, they leaned in, their lips meeting in a soft, tender kiss. Shawn's fingers moved from Percy's chin to cup his face and they inched closer. Percy's mind raced with one thought, I swear if anything disrupts this kiss, but as if on cue, Simon stirred and came out of the room, crying. Shawn quickly pulled back. Simon, confused and scared, ran to his dad, crying because he had woken up in an unfamiliar room. Percy sighed, watching Simon cling to Shawn. How can I even be mad at him? He muttered under his breath. The next day, as promised, Shawn took Percy to the hospital to check every inch of his body, ensuring nothing was seriously hurt. Shawn was serious about signing Percy up for martial arts lessons, but Percy negotiated his way into getting self-defense lessons from Shawn instead. Simon, already learning martial arts at school, didn't need the lessons, so it became an evening routine for Percy and Shawn. One evening, after their self-defense training, they lay side by side on the floor, catching their breath and staring up at the ceiling. Percy broke the comfortable silence, asking, Do you still feel the same? Shawn, confused, glanced over. Huh? Percy turned his head to face him. Do you still think I shouldn't like you? That you can't like me back? Shawn went silent, unsure of how to respond. Percy sat up and spoke again. When you asked me before what I liked about you, I couldn't answer. I'll admit, my feelings back then might have been, as you said, a fleeting attraction. But now, after getting to know you and spending so much time with you, I know I don't just like you, I've fallen in love with you. Shawn stayed quiet as Percy continued, If you ask me again why I love you, I might still not have a concrete answer, because I don't have a particular reason why. I just found myself falling for you deeper and deeper every day. If you are still not convinced about my love for you, and you still need a reason why I love you, then I can list a lot. I love the way you smile. I love the way you talk. I love your smell. I love your kind heart. I love your patience. I love how you are a great father to your son. I love your eyes, your nose, your ears, your lips. If I had all day, I could list everything I love about you, and still not be done. I love you as a whole. I love you and everything that comes with you. I love you because you are you. Do you still need me to go on? Shawn, feeling overwhelmed, covered his eyes with his hand, realizing he was getting teary. Percy gently removed his hand, caressing his face as he chuckled softly. Did I make you cry? Shawn shook his head and hugged Percy, burying his face in his shoulder. Percy stroked his hair, his voice tender. You don't have to answer me right now. Before he could finish his sentence, Shawn said, I love you too. Percy blinked in surprise, unsure if he'd heard correctly. Huh? Shawn pulled back, then held Percy's hand in his, meeting his eyes. I love you too, he repeated, this time with more certainty. Now it was Percy's turn to tear up. You can't take back your words. I won't, Shawn promised, his voice soft. Percy then pulled him into a tight hug. Shawn said, Thank you for coming into my life, for turning my house into a home, always filled with laughter. "Thank you for reminding me what it feels like to love someone and to be loved in return," Percy then replied, pulling from the hug. "I only accept thanks and kisses." Shawn smiled and without hesitation, leaned in and pulled Percy into a soft, sensual kiss.